All right, Yevamos Daf Yotes. There's a lot going on in today's daf, but stick with me. Hopefully I'll give a good summary. Basically, I guess to sort of sum what we're doing here, we have two Mishnayos, and we have Reb Shimon who gives a statement, and we're trying to understand pretty much, does Reb Shimon, does the statement apply to the whole Mishnah, to both cases, or does it only apply to one? So we have two interpretations of the two Mishnayos. So let me explain. The first instance is where there are three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Okay, Reuven dies, Levi is born, and then Shimon does yibum on Reuven's wife. Okay, that's case number one. And then Shimon dies afterwards. Okay, so now there's two women here. There's Shimon's ex-wife and there's Reuven's ex-wife. So both of these women are patur from Levi. Why? Reuven's ex-wife is patur because she's an Eishes Ach Shelo Bale Alamo. They're non-contemporary. They never lived at the same time. And Shimon's wife is Asur from Levi because she's the tzara. She's the co-wife of an Eishes Ach Shelo Bale Alamo, which is the same idea, also forbidden. But then there's another case number two, where Reuven dies. Okay, Shimon does yibum, then Levi is born. Okay, and then Shimon dies. So in this instance, the Reuven's ex-wife is still asur to Levi. Why? Because there's still Eishes Ach Shelo Bale Alamo, never existed. And Shimon's ex-wife is actually allowed for Levi. Why? Because when Levi encountered her for the first time, she was permitted to him. And the rule is, if at that point he's allowed to, he's the option of. I think I messed that up. So the Tanakama says in that case, then Levi is still forbidden for both wives, and the reason why is because we have this concept of Zika, which means that, I think that we're going to explain, but it means that because it's as if at the moment that Reuven dies, Levi was, Shimon had pretty much already done yibum with Reuven's wife because of this idea of Zika, which is like this bond that immediately connects you. So then we have Reb Shimon's din. So Tanakama says in both cases, both the wives are prohibited. Reb Shimon comes in after the second case and he says, well, actually in the second case, remember where yibum is done before Levi is born, and Reb Shimon says both are actually permitted in this case. So now what we want to try to understand is, what did Reb Shimon mean by his statement? Which of the two Mishnayos was he referring to? And then how do we understand everything? So we now have two interpretations of what Reb Shimon meant. I'm not going to go into each of the the back and forths, but the daf is pretty heavily discussing and defending each of the two interpretations. There's Rav Oshia and there's Rav Papa. Okay, Rav Oshia says that that when Reb Shimon says that both are permitted, he's referring not just to the second case but also to the first case, and the reason why both wives are permitted even in the first case, right? Remember, the first case is when Reuven dies, then Levi is born. So remember, Levi is now encountering Reuven's wife in a prohibited state. And then Shimon does yibum, and then Shimon dies. So Reb Shimon says, even in that case, both wives are permitted. Why is that so? Because of this idea of Zika, which means that the moment that Reuven died, his wife was immediately connected as if they did yibum with Shimon, and therefore when Levi was born, even though Shimon didn't actually do yibum, but the Zika made it seem as if they already did. That's why they're both permitted, which is pretty wild. So then, according to Rav Oshia's interpretation, Reb Shimon applies to both Mishnayos. Then I'm not going to go into the back and forths, but then there's Rav Papa who comes in and says, no. when Rav Shimon says that both are permitted, he's only referring to the second cases. Why? Because he really does not hold that Zika, it's because of a Zika kiknusua dummy, which means like when Zika is as if you're like fully married, even though you didn't actually do Yibam or anything, but like it just has the same implication. So he denies that. Rav Papa says that Shimon denies Zika kiknusua damia. So Levi encountered Reuven's wife in a forbidden state, and that's why it's only in the second case where Levi was not alive when Shimon did Yibam. That's when he's allowed to, he can decide what he wants to do with Shimon's wife. So those are the two sides. At the end of the day, the Gemara, after explaining both those opinions and defending them heavily, then we try to understand, well, which one does Reb Shimon actually hold? We ultimately prove that it's, not Reb Shimon, which is the correct interpretation? We ultimately say that it is Rav Papa's interpretation, that is the correct one, okay? Then, just because we started talking about this brisa, so we continue on the rest of the daf, we talk about the brisa a little bit more. There's another instance where Shimon, after Reuven dies, Shimon only does half maimar. Maimar is like the act of cohabiting with the Yevam's wife by doing some sort of kiddushin, giving her some sort of basically trying to marry her, what's such a case? So the Gemara says, give me an example of a case where you try to do maimar and you're unsuccessful. So Gemara says, let's say you try to do mekadesh a woman, you give her like some sort of as if you're trying to marry her, and then she says no, and you do it anyway. You force her. So that's the machlokas here. The brisa says in such a case, let's say it's called Aman Hasheni Lasos Mamar V'lo Hispik. So Shimon got up to do maimar on Reuven's wife and it wasn't successful. So what's the din? So the brisa says Reuven's wife is patur because she's still an Eshsach Shelo Bali Alamo. This is patur from Levi, and Shimon's wife either can do Yibam or Chalitza. Why? Because so that's the machlokas here. So the reason why we try to break it down is like he tried to do maimar, he was unsuccessful. And now we have a machlokas between Rebbe Yehuda and the Chachamim in terms of what the din is if it's a forced maimar. Rebbe says a forced maimar is okay, and he learns that from Bia de Yevama, where you can force to Yevama if you want to. And the Chachamim say, no, we actually learn it from Kiddushin because it's marriage related, and we know that you can't force a Kiddushin. So that sort of explains the concept of half maimar, so to speak. And on tomorrow's daf, we're going to go back to the machlokas with Reb Shimon and Rabbanan. We're going to try to analyze it a little bit more, and we'll take it from there. Thanks for following that. It was a little bit tricky, but have a great day.